We don't have to try any harder. We don't need to fight anymore. We don't have to try any harder, no.
Hey, Jacob.
Hi, Scott. I was waiting. Like,
I know for me
did
to
I?
say the typical, how are you, bro?
Well, I was like, oh shit, I probably fucked up my line there
No,
because
you nailed it.
it's been
You did
like
great.
what 3 weeks or something.
At least I was just looking. Is it possible that June 8th was the last time we recorded? That seems crazy to me because that's a month ago.
It doesn't
But
feel
maybe it
right to
is.
me either. I know it just kind of it's all been a blur.
I know we had planned, Jacob and I had planned to record it was either the day of or the day after the Roe v. Wade decision, and I reached. So that's already been probably a couple weeks.
Jesus,
I
yeah.
I texted him and just said I don't really feel like recording today because I can't imagine talking about anything but that, and it just was not in the headspace for it. And Jacob agreed. So yeah, it's probably has been a month.
Yeah, that's crazy. What a month, huh?
Yeah, yeah. How are you doing?
Well, as I said just before we got on, I had a weird illness come through, and so I've been shivering and hacking a little bit, but overall, really well. How about you, man?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going into a ceremony that I can't really speak much about. I'm not trying to be like all mysterious, but we're asked not to talk about it, and that's happening in a few days, and it's 10 days. And it's
Wow.
so I'm really in the energy of that, the build up to it, and very excited about it. One of the things I'm most excited about is that I will be putting my phone away for 10
Mm,
days.
mm.
And I swear, brother, I don't know since I've had a phone, back in whenever we started having phones, if I've ever gone 10 days without connecting to my phone in some way. And if it weren't for this, I don't believe I have the control to do it. So I'm so excited that it's just going to be it's part of this experience, and I was going to say it's not really a choice, but I could sneak to my phone, I'm sure, over the 10 days, but I'm not at all planning to do that. And I'm so excited because I would say one of the things that I find f- most frustrating with myself, though I do provide a lot of grace around it as well, is just my addiction to my phone.
Hmm.
And it seems to be something that I just have not yet been able to transcend in any way, you
Yeah.
know. So I'm really excited about that aspect. There's a lot I'm excited about with the ceremony, and I suspect once it's over, I'll be able to talk more about it. But one of the things is just, oh my goodness, I don't have to think about anything to do with the phone or my
Yeah.
computer or anything.
What do you think the longest has been that you've gone in radio silence on your phone?
Not that long. I went on social media silence for a handful of months last
Hmm.
summer when I was doing the camping nomadic thing, but I would still do stuff on my phone. So I don't honestly, if it's been 2 days, that would be shocking to me. If I went a solid 48 hours, I don't know that I've even done that. What about
Yeah.
you?
Well, I was just thinking about that. It's funny when I moved to Austin. Cell phones. The iPhone wasn't really even out yet when I first moved down there. The first iPhone. I think BlackBerry. There were a few things out, but not that. And I had always resisted getting a early version of a smartphone. And then during that time, I had this. You remember the Motorola Razr, the thin.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, that one I had, and I just refused to get a different one, and it eventually was falling apart. So I literally had rubber bands and tape around it. Um, and I was like, absolutely not. I don't want to get involved with that because I know myself. And I got home, and a guy I was working with at the time actually showed up at my doorstep one day with a new iPhone. He said, "Here, we got to get you into the modern world." So I took it and I knew what was going to happen, and that's exactly what has happened. So
It happens for everybody. I mean, right? I mean, kids don't have a chance.
yeah.
We're these like spiritual dudes on like becoming more conscious every day, and we're totally addicted. Like, how does a child have a chance with this?
Oh my God.
So
I think talked a number of times about Jill Bolte Taylor's book, Whole Brain Living. And
yeah,
toward the back of that, she talked about the various generations and how they interact with technology and how that affects their brain experience and formation and stuff. And it was actually interesting. Like she wasn't as critical of technology in our, children's case as many of us parents feel about it. She said they're actually, in many cases, they're actually interacting in a different way, and this is kind of a sign of it's kind of a characteristic of their generation, which I found interesting. And it wasn't as if she was just passing it off, but I expected her to be deeply scolding, and she actually wasn't that bad.
that is interesting,
Yeah,
especially because I mean, if you separate social media from the phone, maybe it's not that bad. But when you look at social media and how it's impacted depression and anxiety levels in teens and suicide rates in teens, I mean, there appears to be a direct correlation between this media and what's happening for kids.
yeah.
You
I can't deny that, and I know how I feel when I give myself just a little break from the constant input. And I just finished reading The Molecule of More, which
I
is
don't
all
know that.
about it's all about dopamine, Scott, and
Okay.
it's totally fascinating. And I also was really disappointed at the end of the book. I felt like he did a lot of really interesting case studies and talking about how dopamine is this neurochemical that we chase, and it's part of what has propelled the human race forward in developing so many things, but that it actually is counterproductive to actual contentment. And so people who, for example, in the mating situation, finding a mate, we need dopamine because that gets us out there in the mix. But he said people who don't know how to moderate that, or don't have a self-regulating system, often find they can't end up in what they on paper really want, which is some sort of satisfying partnership, because the dopamine is actually pushing them to keep chasing that high. I bring that up because I think that's one of the factors, and I think it's really deliberate in a lot of cases with
Mhm.
gaming companies and social media companies to actually keep hitting us with that chase the dopamine.
It's absolutely deliberate. I mean, did you
Yeah.
see The Social Dilemma, the
No,
documentary?
I was too busy on Facebook.
Yeah. I'm laughing because I'm such an easy audience too. Like, I mean, that was funny, sure, but like,
Let me do this podcast, Scott. You think I'm
yeah,
funny?
yeah. Do you have a what's your relationship with TV and Netflix and shows? Do you watch a lot of shows or anything like that?
Yeah, I don't have cable, and haven't really. I guess one time I did for a while, but as you know, I've talked about this. I didn't watch television until I was in my mid 20s, and I went through a period of just kind of just like an Amish kid going off the plant, the acres. I mean, I just went fucking wild for a while and watched everything. And yeah, I really enjoy some shows. Like, I find myself, Better Call Saul. I've watched Breaking Bad more times than I'd like to admit. The
Mhm.
Sopranos. Yeah, yeah. No, I enjoy plenty of shows.
The reason I ask is because it seems like you actually finish books and read a lot, which is something I suspect I would do more of if I weren't binging things as often as I do.
Well, lately, and I don't like this actually, but it has been a work around for me. Lately, I will go and take, intentional breaks and go hike or walk. And I listen to a lot of audiobooks. Now, I've found that I often have to listen to a book if a book really has my attention, but I also am scattered, too many things going on. I'll lose my place. So I found that one solution for me is to listen to the same book 3 or 4 times, um, and it's kind of surprising, like, why would I want to do that? But I always find out, okay, now I've read the book if I actually take it in a few times.
Gotcha. So that's how you consume books typically, is through audio?
I don't want to say yes. That's been the case for the last couple of years. I have had a harder time settling myself, and this is, I mean, actually so interesting as part of this conversation. Like, I do a lot of reading, business reading online through emails and things, but that puts my brain in a very scan state, so I'm not
Mhm.
savoring.
Yeah.
And so I find, especially with as intense as my work has been for the last couple of years, it can be really hard for me to get into the slower mode where I can actually savor a book on paper. But that
Yeah.
is my preferred method, is sitting down with a book.
Why don't you want to say yes to audio? Is there shame in it or something? I don't understand.
I don't know.
Are you a snob?
I think I'm an old fashioned person with that. Like, I really love the smell and feel of books. I love
Gotcha.
underlining states. So I have paper books that I'm reading right now. And I'm just old fashioned enough. And I'm a Taurus. I like the tactile, all the stuff,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Right. So what's on your heart today, these days?
oh man, I posted a video update. I think it was last weekend, and it it put me in, because I'm just feeling the stress and tension of the existence that most of us are experiencing. And I got into, I was, 4th of July. It's like, oh man, this is the last thing I want to be doing today, is any kind of celebrating our supposed,
Hmm.
dominance in the world and our freedoms and things like that. But it got me really thinking, and so I went into this update and talked about true inner freedom. What that means. Brought in some of the Viktor Frankl stuff. I don't know where if you want to go anywhere with that, but that seems to be what's in me right now. And that, to me, Scott, was interesting, because as I was recording that, I noticed that I'm not speaking just to a particular audience of people who would agree probably with you and me about a lot of things. I began to notice myself tuning in empathetically to the fear, the actual panic that a lot of people on both sides are feeling about watching what they feel like is their freedoms slipping away.
Hmm.
And that doesn't make me less upset about what some people on the far right are doing, but I think it was useful for me internally to be able to hold kind of the whole world for a little while there, and just say, there's just so much fear out there right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, you referenced it as kind of true internal freedom, I think is what you said. And
Hmm.
yeah, for me, what I hear in that for myself is just coming to my own truth. Like, what is most true for me in terms of how I want to be present in my life in this reality.
Hmm.
And what I continuously come back to, and I'm sure I've said on this podcast many times, and had to get myself back to that place after the Roe v. Wade verdict, and after any number of mass shootings that have happened since then,
Hmm.
is is that no matter whether I see the world as imploding or flourishing, my call is the same. And
Hmm.
that's what it becomes so important for me to remind myself. It's like, no matter what is happening in the world, who do I want to be within the context of it? And for me, that answer is always the same. I want to be a person as deeply aligned with love and spirit as possible. I want to be connecting through the energy of love and emitting through that energy. And it doesn't matter what I'm seeing outside,
Hmm.
that call is the same. And applying that call to however it is I want to show up within the context of Roe v. Wade or mass shootings or whatever it is,
Hmm.
it's like I want to be guided by that call. And so in what feels what can feel especially frustrating to me when I look at the outside world, and when I was, Jacob, when that verdict came down, it's not that I hadn't considered how it would be for me if I could get pregnant and
Mm-hmm.
had the government mandating I carry a pregnancy to term and give birth against my will. I have certainly considered that before.
Mm-hmm.
But I really, really like sank into that reality once Roe v. Wade was overturned. And what came up for me was just these feelings of profound violation,
Mm-hmm.
like a violation I can't even connect to because it felt so horrific. It felt so heartbreaking. It felt so um, unconscionable
Mm-hmm.
that I could be forced in that circumstance to do that. And when I was sitting with it, I was thinking about humanity, and one of the ways I feel like we've really gone astray is the ease with which we want to mandate control over others when we ourselves would never want to be controlled in the same way. It's
Yeah.
like the ease with which we allow our hypocrisy to lead us through
Right.
this world. And if more of us would take the time to sit in the realities that we want to control and judge and condemn and really imagine, like, what would that feel like if that were my reality? How would it really feel to be a transgender person in this reality? And
Right.
how would that feel? And to see the laws that are being created against my rights, right? If we could, how would it really feel to be someone who um, grew up with guns,
Yeah.
who grew up hunting, that was a part of my culture and life? How might that be to experience that and to feel like threatened that my rights to hunt, not that those are being taken away, but if you really lived in that experience and believed that that could ultimately be taken away, it's like if we could just do this more often with one another, what kind of healing, or at least at the very least, what kind of communication might that create between us?
Mm-hmm. Well, yes. I mean, I feel like that really is always the key. I've been in the middle of a personal tangle lately, and it is interesting, Scott, because when that happens for me, you and I have, and I'm sure many of our listeners too have just done a lot of work over the years to learn how to be balanced and to learn how to take a breath and a step back from a situation. And so there are a lot of things that don't rock my boat very hard anymore, but when something does, when it's in my body, when there's fear
Mhm.
and anger in there, um, there's part of me that wants to try to rise above that and go, oh, no, 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 I'm always above the fray. And
Mhm.
I was talking with a dear friend yesterday about that. And I said, I know that when I'm feeling those things, that represents a growth point for me.
Mhm.
And it's again, it can be a little difficult. And I think for a lot of people who have been on, an intentional spiritual path of some kind for a long time, it can feel like, wait a minute, to even admit that I'm feeling anything intense about this
Mhm.
would be like I'm getting knocked down a grade or something. And I think it's easy to try to retreat to the more superior position of, here, let me advise the situation,
Right.
rather than say, how am I in this situation,
Yeah.
and where am I being asked to grow? Um,
Give us specific examples, like what has come up recently that has triggered you in that way, and what do you see as the growth point?
hmm. I should have known that you're not going to like take your thumb off the knotted muscle. No, that's great. Well, one such situation was with one of my siblings, and I just, we're just such a close group, and this one touched something very deep, and it came out in conflict between us that is so unusual, and we were both in it together like that, and I have never in my life had a more intense bout with someone than that. And I'm grateful that there is so much love there. There's so much deposit in the emotional bank accounts with each other that could happen. And we
Mhm.
could come back to it later and just, hug each other and take a breath and go, what the fuck was that? But also that was not just something to dismiss it. So in my case with that one, Scott, in my tendency over time has often been to, the fight, flight, or freeze, but there's another one called fawn. So in that curve, when I would feel really anxious or feel conflict coming on, a lot of times my reaction response would be to go into how can I just make this all easy for both of us,
Mm-hmm.
but less about me, more how can I placate this other person, whether that means an apology, whether it means being the bigger person, whatever. And so it was interesting when I did the post-mortem on that experience, I realized, oh, this is really calling me forward to even know how the fuck to even have a boundary, to know what it feels like, to be strong in a situation and not to be afraid of anger, like not to be afraid when I'm feeling anger,
Mm-hmm.
to be aware of it, to ask, how can I process this? Usefully, but not necessarily to just shove it down or dismiss it, deny it, because that was my way, and I was carrying tremendous amounts of anger and grief in my body for so many years. And I feel like that's an example of a growth point for me of
Mm-hmm.
really, and actually very, very grateful to this sibling of mine, for showing up, unconsciously pushing that button, but then being conscious with me enough to be able to, own each of us own our side of it, and then compare notes on, oh wow, this is how I can feel myself growing, and the other one's, yeah, wow, this is how I'm being asked to grow.
Yeah. And
I don't
I
know if
mean,
that was
that's
specific
beautiful.
enough, but
No, well, I mean, you're also speaking, I mean, that's beautiful, the example you gave, and you said you have years of a love bank established between the two of you, but I
yeah.
feel like what so many of us are experiencing every day on
Hmm.
some level is the rage is being provoked by strangers, by people we don't
Right.
know, by politicians, by people on social media who have opposing views to what we see as very important convictions, and figuring out, because I want to be able to come to a place that you were able to come to with your sibling, with a perfect stranger. Like for me, I see that as our potential.
Hmm.
I am deeply pro-choice, every cell in my being,
Hmm.
and I don't want to make enemies of people who aren't.
Hmm.
That isn't, because I don't see any value in it. I don't
Hmm.
see any value in it on a macro level. I don't see any value in it on a micro level. It doesn't serve me and how I feel. It doesn't serve the country to make enemies of each other.
Right.
And yet we have these wildly important issues that are affecting the lives of more than half the population. And how do I don't say this from a Pollyanna place. It's like, how do we find a way to communicate about it that is more peaceful, or that lends itself to hearing each other? And I don't know if it I don't think it's possible unless both parties coming to the conversation, whether that's two people or 100 people or whatever, want to be in real dialogue with each other. I don't have answers for it. I do want to.
No.
What I would say to it is for all of us to really consider, this is speaking to what I said earlier, is like, really consider the life you want to be living. How do you want to be showing up, and how do you want to be feeling within yourself based on how you're showing up? Because those things are so intimately related. You cannot be waging a war against anyone on this planet without going to war with some aspect of yourself. That is how energy works. And so, if you want to be living a more peaceful life, you have to figure out a way to bring more peace into your relationship with yourself and others. It's the only, in my experience, I should say, it's the only way to do it. You can't
Yeah.
wage war and expect peace.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, we certainly agree on that, Scott. It's interesting. I shared something yesterday, by a native elder, and the beginning part of the passage was, we were told that America would come to an end. And it went on from there. It was very loving. It wasn't, there was no attack in it at all, but it was actually more of a peaceable sort of reflection on, look, this is something that is breaking down right now. Much of it has to do with our inability to live with each other and with the earth in a truly responsible, loving way. But that got me thinking a lot about, this is going to, God, I don't think you're going to like this part. No, I really feel like in some ways, as terribly distressing as it is, Roe v. Wade came out the year I was born, um, either that year or the year after. And so my entire life, that's what I've known, and it's always been there. When I was a child, my parents and the people in church, were terribly distressed by it. They would pray for the end of Roe v. Wade, all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting about it, Scott, is I completely disagree with the reasons for it being taken away. I am really distressed at the impact it's already having in so many lives.
Mm-hmm.
But here's something interesting. If we really want to see what's possible in this country, in this world, it's going to require that things we've been resting on as safety, or sort of veiling the really harsh light of, this is what's actually true about our structure, like those things might have to be taken away so that it's intense enough that the structure can actually change structurally. And I would never say, oh, let's do all the, I mean, I feel very distressed. My mother, who's somewhat more conservative, was talking about, something about pro-life. And I said, I got actually really, I felt a lot of emotion. I said, listen, those goddamn conservatives, if they're not willing to put their money where their mouth is, my sister has a new baby and has gone through a lot of stuff. I said, if Kitty, didn't have a family around her right now, she would be fucked,
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel this very intensely, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that protection of a court case that got decided, almost 50 years ago, has represented a durable but pretty flimsy barrier between us and what's really going on out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like disharmony. I love my peaceful life, and I can feel us collectively, and especially in America, going through a period of tremendous intensity, tremendous disharmony. That has been revealing the tremendous inequality, the tremendous hypocrisy of our structure. And it's so hard to face that. And I can feel that's what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing you saying on some level, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that like for sometimes things have to crumble completely
Mm-hmm.
for real change to emerge.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. And I honestly, Jacob, for the first time in my life, in this past year, I have considered not voting,
Mm-hmm.
which is something I not only have I never considered it, it's something I judged harshly.
Hmm.
And yet, when I look at the systems
Mm-hmm.
that we have created, when I look at our government, for me, so much of it feels entirely corrupt. So much of it feels just bought out by the highest bidders, and it's like, why am I participating? Why am I participating in something that I want to crumble?
Right.
And my participating in any way is only helping to sustain it, And then and I see the other side of it too. This is where I would say the struggle lives. Then when this verdict came down, it's like, yes, I can remove myself from the system entirely,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a party that wants to support a woman's right to choose, and that's just fact as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can continue to support that party. I don't know where to go with it, Jacob, because I feel like
Yeah.
it's all corrupt. I feel like the Democratic Party had opportunities to codify this verdict. There were. I just feel like they're all in so many ways in the wrong through my perspective, and
Hmm.
not about creating the kind of world that I really want to be living in.
Yeah.
That to participate in it, it feels like I'm going against something in myself that feels true to me.
Listen, man, I stepped out for about a decade of voting for exactly the reasons you're talking about. Um, and I felt, I don't know, within the last 5 years, I felt it was time for me to re-engage to a degree, but understanding that the game is a fucking mess.
Mhm.
And it is, unfortunately, it is a game for a lot of these people.
Yes.
Yes. And so that to me, it feels so sick to be part of
Yes.
and giving my energy to the system that I know really isn't. Neither side is really going to the depth of principle that I would, even not even sort of that I would care about.
Yeah. It just feels so toxic. It is toxic,
Yeah.
and that's just the government. And then when you branch out and you look at all the different industries that are so corrupt and toxic, right? And
Hmm.
there's no way. I mean, we've talked about this before. There's no way to live in this society unless you completely remove yourself, give up your phone, go off grid, grow your own vegetables, have no participation in anything, because if you participate in anything, you're participating in something that to some degree is corrupt and toxic, because
Yeah.
everything that controls everything is built upon the foundation of more power, more money. And it's and this is the world we live in. So these are the choices we're given. How do you want to? I don't want to be someone who is in constant reaction to the world we're living in. I'm not choosing to live off grid and give up my phone and disassociate myself to that level. That doesn't feel like a choice. I don't feel called to make that choice.
Hmm.
So I don't want to be in a fight against everything here. I want to be in good relationship with the choices I'm making here, with what I'm choosing to participate in, while at the same time not giving so much of my energy to things that don't feel good.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it's
Yeah.
figuring out that balance is very tricky. It's why I don't want I literally physically can't watch cable news anymore. If
Yeah.
I It is like watching a missive from, if did you read the Hunger Games or see the Hunger Games?
Hmm.
It feels like watching a broadcast from the Capitol in the Hunger Games. To watch CNN, pick any of them,
Hmm.
for even 30 seconds, I feel like I am in a dystopian,
Yeah.
like insane story that I want nothing. I don't want to be a part of that at all.
Agreed.
You know?
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad we're going these places today, Scott. I think it's important. You and I, by gift of personality and a lot of work, I think it is more and more of reflexive response for us to move into, let's hold the whole, let's have empathy, let's move
Yeah.
back into peace as quickly as possible. And that's how I choose to live my life as much as possible. And I think it's really important for everyone to hear some of these real raw emotions from us because, I think that otherwise there can be this idea that, okay, that's great, but you're at 30,000 feet. It's nice for you to have the privilege to not be in the middle of this stuff, and God, Scott, my life isn't as impacted by some of these things out there. I mean, guns or no guns, abortion, no abortion. When it comes right down to me and the little bubble I live in,
Mhm.
if I were willing to just do this, it probably wouldn't change my life a lot. It does reflect on the world that I want everyone to be able to live in, though.
Yeah, and the reality is, I think most of us would agree, even if you're coming at it from a completely different angle. I feel like most of us would agree that the systems that have been created in our country and beyond our country, but I'll speak for our country, are corrupt and
Hmm.
toxic and not ultimately serving the greater good of the population. I think whether you're like on the far right or the far left, you would probably make that statement comfortably. And if you're in the middle, you'd make that statement comfortably. So again, it's like we're in this cycle. It is the definition of insanity, right? Continuing to do the same thing and expecting a different result. And it's like, how, where, when does a tipping point start? How many people? It's what I feel like you were speaking to when you were talking
Hmm.
about things needing to crumble
Hmm.
entirely, for people to come together and say what needs to be created is something entirely different. This is not working. And the only way something entirely different gets created is when enough people are unwilling to participate in the thing that is not working anymore. And it takes a lot. I think it takes a lot of courage to do that, but it's not about just not participating. It's also then about what is it you're seeking to create,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And I'm
Hmm.
not someone, Jacob, in all honesty, I'm not. Maybe it's because I'm at the ripe old age of 51 now. It's like I don't feel called to be on the front lines of creating something new in this active, like giving my whole life over to it way.
Hmm.
I feel like I want to be making choices through my work, through what I say and put into the world, through my relationships that are aligned with love and with connection to spirit. And I believe there is power in that, and I believe that that creates something. But I'm not someone who's going to be the person like, so these are the new systems that need to be created in order for us to all be living more peacefully together.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I feel like that to rush to that for anyone is it's going to create more conflict because
yeah,
the systems are so entrenched right now on both sides and in the middle and everywhere. It's
yeah,
so calcified. It reminds me of Picasso's famous quotation, every act of creation is first an act of destruction.
yes,
And also, I'm reminded about the original meaning of the word apocalypse back in the Greek. It literally means the unveiling. And Scott, I'm just going to say something. We are living through the apocalypse right now.
yeah. It feels
This
like it.
this is the
Yeah,
apocalypse, and that doesn't have to end in some sort of book of Revelations, like fire falling from the sky and stuff. Um, when we look at it through the sense of it's an unveiling, I mean, look back to 2019, 2020, 21, 22. Here we are. I mean, it's like the curtains are being just yanked back on everything: racial inequality, sexual misconduct, financial shit, government. I mean, here we are in the middle of an unprecedented experience of watching a former president, his complete lies and
mhm.
structure of just lies and violence being revealed right before our eyes. It's just we're sitting there watching it, and there's still people going, "Well, I don't know. There's, we might want to prosecute that, we might not." I'm sitting there going, "What's the question here?"
That's how much distrust there is, Jacob, in our systems, that even when we're being shown clearly,
Yeah,
you people don't trust. Half the people don't trust what.
right.
And I haven't watched any of that. I've had like I'm not part. I haven't participated in that, though. I've seen some of the information around it.
Yeah,
Not that not that it took seeing this for me to like see that Trump was a liar and corrupt, and you know what I mean. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't obviously we don't have answers for this, but I do feel I want to come back. I continue to feel called to come back to what I said earlier, I guess, which is that how do you, for everyone listening, what kind of life do you want to be living? How do you want to be showing up? What
right,
is most important to you, and are you leading with that example? Right? Is love important to you?
right,
Is integrity important to you? Is honesty important to you? Is acknowledging your hypocrisy so you're not being fueled by it important to you? If these things are important to you, then I feel like it's critical that we live in alignment with those things, and that there is power in that, because the more people who are aligning with love and in ownership of their own hypocrisies, and so that they cannot be spewing that vitriol on others, this is how change gets created.
Right.
But Jacob, the it takes a tipping point only occurs when it's a lot of people who are
Mhm.
willing to own their place in it.
I agree. And I'm really glad that we're circling back here, Scott. That was so in my heart as I shared that video last week. Was in the time of my life when I felt most victimized by the world, 2008, 9. That's when I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning for the first time. And it wasn't like that changed everything, but it changed me enough inside to make me ask the question, who do I choose to be in the face of my own personal apocalypse right now?
Mm-hmm.
Who do I choose to be right now? And when I read his words that he had to like memorize, because he went into the concentration camp with his manuscript of the book he'd been working on for years sewn inside of his coat,
Yeah.
and his wife and young child were torn away from him, and his coat was taken from him. And during that experience of as intense and terrible as what we're experiencing right now in the world is, most of us I can't imagine the experience he walked through.
Yeah.
And that sank in so much to me. If this person who was at the bare wire of human existence in ways I can't even imagine,
Yeah.
if this person could allow himself to open to this kind of wisdom that says the last human freedom is to make that choice, you know, um, I feel like that really is, for me, it becomes the question, in the face of all the circumstances out there, who do I choose to be? And I feel like in many cases, without unplugging totally, because that is such a radical choice, but in many cases, choosing to spend more time with people with whom I do have solid emotional bank accounts on both sides,
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily agree, but the bank account is there. I mean, my emotional bank account gets drained so quickly by being out in social media land and watching the trolls and watching the people show up and go, here's an article I shared about, one of the January 6th hearings, and it's, these are Republicans saying this, and there's these trolls showing up saying you're being led down the garden path. None of that really happened. I'm like, I can't believe what where are we? My emotional bank account gets zapped immediately.
Yeah.
I go sit with my mother, and we don't agree about some of these things, and we love each other so much, and we know that there's safety, there's honesty there. That to me is part of the antidote. It reminds me that just because some of these people don't agree with me does not necessarily make them the enemy. That helps me stay sane in the middle of it a little bit at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And coming back to, it's so funny because the ways in which our deepest convictions or understandings of life can be challenged by
Hmm.
the reality of life. Like, I firmly hold to everything here is energy, and energy affects all other energy, which is to say, when you're operating from a place of love, you're naturally creating more love. That's the only way, that's the only possibility. And yet, so if more and more of us are showing up rooted in our hearts, committed to, not committed to our hypocrisies, but committed to acknowledging them and making different choices, the only possibility is that we're going to be generating more of that in the world
Hmm.
and impact more people who are then inclined to make similar choices because they're being affected by this energy, and momentum builds. And so this is what I deeply believe. Like, this is ultimately what I see as the answer.
Hmm.
And yet, when you look around at a world where there are so many people who are just still in this autopilot zombie state,
Hmm.
And I don't say that from a judgmental place as much as this is
Sure.
just the reality we're living in.
Yeah.
It can feel hard to stay connected to that truth of how energy works. But when I bring myself back to it, even in the face of so much suffering and so much injustice, it's like stay connected to what you believe in your whole being to be true,
Right.
right? Like and trust in that. Science supports that. Woo woo supports it. Everyone is supporting that idea around energy and momentum. It's like trust it is truth, and trust that the energy you're putting out into the world is making a difference. It is having an impact.
Yes, and stay rooted in Scott. I don't get forceful very often, but I just want to say this if to people out there who find themselves vacillating pretty wildly between, and like sometimes feeling a little bit of peace and then just so much anxiety, so much anger or distress. I just want to say that getting rooted in a practice right now, getting
Mhm.
rooted in a practice, a very simple practice of grounding, of clearing, of releasing those really heavy energies. If you're not doing that, then you are actually making the world a worse place. And I know that sounds pretty forceful and direct, but I just want to say, like, don't think about learning how to breathe. Don't think about learning how to settle yourself down through some kind of meditation and go, oh yeah, that'd be a nice thing to do. Listen, if you're out there fighting in the world and
Mhm.
feeling so much intensity, and that's not the world you want to create, then let me just say, if it doesn't start right here, if it doesn't start with a daily practice, just don't be surprised if you have very, very little peace as we all move through this together, you know?
Yeah. I mean, one, it's very exciting to see you be so forceful.
Really?
it's, it's not a side of you I'm used to. But also what you're speaking to is the power we hold.
Hmm.
The
Yes.
power we hold in the life that we're not only in our personal lives, but
Yeah.
in the on the macro level, and that's not to be um,
Yes.
underrated,
It's not, Scott.
underestimated.
I was listening to a fucking, I meant to send it to you. Um, Dr. Zach Bush, MD. Are you familiar with any of
Yeah,
his
sure.
stuff? Well, he was on the Luke Story podcast. Somebody sent me the link, and I don't tend to consume long podcasts very often,
Mhm.
but if somebody I respect sends me, I will listen to it.
Yeah,
I was so enthralled by what he was saying on so many levels. I mean, what a gift that man is to
yeah,
to our world right now. Holy shit. A scientist and a spiritualist and all these things,
I
and the
agree.
gift of eloquence that I'm just envious of. But one thing I wanted to say, you mentioned earlier about the tipping point, and I loved this so much. Zach Bush said, because Luke's story is much more of a conspiracy guy, and they actually address that and very beautifully together. But Zach Bush said, listen, he was talking about the biosphere and the farming and the toxic farming and all this stuff. He's like, listen, I want you to know something though. He said, I have a story, a true story of a farmer who had a small farm in the midst of this wasteland of chemically scorched farms around. And he said, this guy just said, I've got to do something different. I've got to try it. And he was breaking all the rules of all the farms around him, but he started to plant differently and not use pesticides and all this stuff. And Zach said within, like, I don't know, I think it was 2 years, he said his farm has become an absolute oasis, a model for what's possible. The insects, the birds, the flourishing, the yield per acre, everything is just, doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And he said, listen, here's what I need you to know. He said, life is seeking life is seeking portals, life is seeking channels who are willing. He said, you don't have to get 40% or 30% or even 20% of the farms out there, and certainly not 50% to start doing it differently. He said, what happens is if you make a choice to honor life, life comes seeking you out. Life comes and says, let's, like, so much relief. Let's pour through this open channel. And I loved that. He said, you want to change the world? Start changing your world. He's like, watch what life does for you.
I believe that wholeheartedly, and
I do
apply
too.
that to everything. Apply it to your creativity. Apply it to your
Exactly.
work. Apply it to your desire for relationships, deeper relationships. I really we are being supported through the choices we make, through the connection to spirit, through the connection to love. I believe that deeply. That's a beautiful story.
Well, I loved it. It was so life-giving to even hear it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah,
So all is not lost. Is that what you're saying, Jacob?
well,
Is that
it's
what you're
not, Scott.
promising us?
I mean, that's what's so interesting is it's like the belief that life ends at death, the belief that everything is scarce, the belief that it's a zero-sum game. I wrote a Facebook post last night. It was kind of an allegory parable of having a dream of two worlds that existed exactly the same time and same place. One was called scarcity,
Uh-huh.
and it was on my heart, and I shared it. And I I feel like if we can just get clear on the fact that we are moving through an apocalypse right now, it's worldwide, everyone's affected. Things are not going to go back to 1950s tidy. It's not going to happen. Okay. Um, so right now, it's no longer optional. It's no longer optional. If I want to move through this time with peace, with healthy abundance, with health, with love, with connection to people, it is no longer an option to just let, okay, those spiritual people over there are doing their thing, they're meditating and doing their shit. Listen, if you want any of those good things, it is totally possible in the middle of an apocalypse. It's totally possible, but it's not optional. It's no longer optional. It's like life is, the pressure cooker is on to the point where those who are actually committed to, not just in their head, but with their whole selves, committed to, this is the world I choose to live in, it can no longer just be a mental acceptance, some kind of a nice mantra we say, be the
Yeah.
change you wish to see in the world. No, I have to fucking be that change. I have to be that change,
Yeah, I
you
totally
know?
agree. Again, whether the world is flourishing or crumbling, who do you want to be within it?
Right.
And what are you doing to create that for yourself? And
Yeah.
what's so powerful about that, Jacob, I know we both know from our lived experience, and I'm sure a lot of people listening, is just that this isn't just this isn't just talk. It's like,
No.
if we consider how much more peaceful we are in our lives. I am the most peaceful I've ever been in my life at a time when I see the world as the most insane I've ever
Right.
seen it in my
Right.
life.
Right.
Which isn't to suggest I'm always living in this peaceful, blissful state, but it is to suggest, yeah, I'm more peaceful, and it doesn't have to do with the outside world. It has to do with the work I'm doing with myself and the commitment I have to my inner peace, to love, to the choices I'm making. These things
Right.
are not by accident,
Right.
you know?
No, it's not by accident. And when if we could imagine, I drive and hike in the hills all the time. I love the nature all around me, and I love the big cliffs, Scott, and the waterfalls and these jagged peaks. And I often think as I drive through or hike through these, holy fuck, that was an intense period of time on this earth, however many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years ago, when these things happened, when these things formed. That was an intense time on this
Mhm,
planet.
mhm. Sure.
Uh, physically speaking, there was not much that was left unshaken, unburnt, unbroken, unsomethinged. And here I am enjoying it as this little tiny ant of a human being enjoying it. It's like, oh, how beautiful, and it is. And I want to point that out as to say, if we can quickly accept the fact that we are moving through a time, it may not be physically like 3D material, the world breaks up like that again. But if we can understand that we are moving through that level of intensity, emotionally, spiritually, energetically, I think it can help us not say, yay, this is so much fun, but it can help us say, this is a time of immense change. And whether we see it during our lifetimes or not, things are happening right now that will come out. Life will find a way through this, and it will emerge as, look, life is so powerful. Life seeks balance. It seeks it seeks cleansing, it seeks the health of itself. And
Mhm.
so that's really hard to stay in tune with sometimes when we're feeling so affected by the intensity. But I think that if we can understand that if I give my life to this place right now, if I give my life as lovingly, as honestly, as powerfully as I can, that is, I mean, that's to me the antidote to despair. That's the antidote to feeling like I'm
Mhm.
just a victim. Why did I choose to be born during this goddamn time on earth?
Yeah.
That changes me. I'm not. I know I probably feel a little preachery today. It's less about saying this is what you should do. I just want to invite you to know that if you're willing to make that choice and step into that, and to begin really rooting your practice and not letting it slide for weeks and months at a time and go, okay, yeah, I should meditate today. It's like, understand this is as important as whatever prescriptions you might be taking every day that support your life or the foods you eat. It's actually that important, you know?
Absolutely. And a reminder that self love, for anyone out there listening who is still resistant to taking their relationship with themselves as a priority for
Yeah,
whatever reason, know that it is never just about yourself.
right.
What Jacob is speaking to is deepening the relationship you have with yourself,
Mhm.
prioritizing self love
Mhm.
because it serves our world.
Right.
It doesn't only serve yourself. Let that be an invitation to really, really work on the relationship you have with yourself. Play with the relationship you have with yourself. Get curious about it and know that this is one concrete way we can all be supporting the creation of a better, more loving, more compassionate, more beautiful world.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Scott, I loved that you just shared from your own life, which is you're a sensitive guy. You called me a few weeks ago and said, I just don't have it in me to do the podcast today because of everything that's going on. I mean, you were clearly very affected by that. And I love your honesty, but I love what you said. This is the most peaceful time that you've experienced in your life. And I share that as well. I'm surprised by how much inner peace I have overall. Um, but I just want to say thank you for highlighting that in the middle of all of it. This is the most peaceful time you've ever had.
Sure. And to anyone out there who think I'm hearing a voice, well, of the voice of privilege, right?
Uh,
Like, what about
yeah,
people who are being directly affected by specific things? How are they supposed to find peace?
yeah,
The point we're making is that the peace does not come from what's happening in the outside world, even if it's in total support of who you are or not. There are
right.
plenty of people with my privilege or greater privilege who are not living peacefully. It's not
Hmm.
about that. It's about
Hmm.
understanding that it is possible to create deeper peace in your life by exploring and strengthening the relationship you have with yourself, no matter what is happening in the outside world.
That's
There are
right.
people with less privilege than I have that whom I'm sure are much more peaceful than I have. This is not suggesting that privilege doesn't exist. It absolutely does. It's only to suggest that the peace we create for ourselves can only be created by ourselves,
Yeah.
you know?
I think it's crucial. So glad I admitted on that video update I did last week, I talked about my privilege, Scott, and I'm so glad you brought it up here again because I feel like if that's not addressed, it is so easy and really quite valid for a lot of teachers out there who are speaking from behind a very protective wall of
Yeah.
everything. It's so difficult for anyone to hear them who is going through the middle of their own apocalypse.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing that up. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's true.
Sure. All right, brother. You feel like this is a good place to end?
I feel like you and I have probably about 10 or 12 hours of catch up to do,
I
but
know.
I don't know that we should record all of that for
No,
everybody.
no,
But
no, no. Just 6 hours. I'll be
yeah, it's just six. Everybody just clear schedules for the next day or two. I know that you're going, so you're starting on this retreat soon.
on Sunday. So in 3 days.
Okay, so we
Yeah,
won't
and
be
that's going
back
to be
here for a
10
while.
days I'll be out. Yeah, so it'll be a couple weeks before we come back together.
Well, when we come back, I'll want to make sure that we share, anything you have coming up after that. And if you have anything that's coming up in between or that people can just connect with, like your Substack, what do you want to talk about there?
No, I mean Substack's still going. You can, if you want my newsletter where I share things that you're not going to find on social media in general. And if you're in Santa Fe, my dear friend Ruthie Lindsay and she's here for the month, hanging out in Santa Fe, and we're going to do a workshop together on the 24th that we haven't even announced yet, but at some point it will be announced. And you can find that if you're going to be in Santa Fe on Sunday, July 24th. What about you,
Hmm.
Jacob?
Well, I've always been terrible at keeping secrets. I mean, really bad. I'm kind of known for it. So I have this retreat I'm putting together for the Bay Area in the fall, late October, early November. We're looking for a venue. It's going to be hybrid, so we'll beam it out to the world, but also have a couple hundred people be able to be in person. And I wish I could talk about a couple of the names who are pretty much on board, because
Uh-huh.
people would pee themselves right now. I mean, it's very exciting.
Oh,
So I
nice.
can't talk about that yet, but it's coming, and I'm very excited about it. And I'm you know what, Scott, I'm just gonna, and maybe you have something like this on your site somewhere, some practice. I know we've talked about the journaling practice and things that I share. I'm going to go ahead and put a link to that. It's no cost. This one includes short video, like 3-minute video of instruction how to use it, but it's journaling, reflective journaling, self-healing. But there's also a meditation practice in there, a guided visualization that I recorded to go with that program. So that's for free. I'm just going to put the link to it in the show notes. But yeah,
Great.
anything on your site that is like that?
I mean, not really, but if you're on my Substack, which you can be there for free as well, I mean, everything I write about, usually there's something in the newsletters that offers tools to, bring yourself back to center or to grounding or whatever. So
Yeah.
there's a bunch of stuff on there now.
Well, and we've really gone into this today. I want to invite you to not let these invitations, if it's sort of calling your name. One of the things in the book, the Molecule of More, was just talking about, Scott, like part of where we are is the insatiability of just get more
Hmm.
information, and not actually let it root down. He talks about the need to allow the here and now chemicals to settle down in our body, which allows us to actually have connected relationships and actually nurture each other and go into it. But he said it's so difficult because of our pace. But because of that, it's easy sometimes to hear an invitation and even resonate with it, even feel like, oh, I want to do that. But because we're so conditioned, our brains are so conditioned to want the next pop, it's sometimes hard to slow down enough just to do a practice for a few minutes a day. And I want to invite you as a service to the world, your peace and peacefulness that you can take out into the world, and as a service to yourself. I just want to invite you, take advantage of some of these invitations we're making today, because this can be that little dose of sanity, of medicine, of peace. I wouldn't recommend it if it's not something I do every single day myself. So
I love that. And I'm going to jump off of that in terms of things people hear that they
yeah,
don't internalize. I want to
yeah,
read a review we
yeah.
got.
Oh, great.
And
Perfect.
encourage people to rate and review the podcast. If you're enjoying this, like, share it, spread the word, help us spread the word. It says, this is from Spoon 1945. It says, genuine and warm. I feel like I am sitting down with good friends every time I listen. Your warmth, spontaneity, and candor are so rare and welcome. Plus, it is uncanny how you so often touch on something I am exactly struggling with. Unlike many shows where it feels like an information dump or a learning project, this feels like actual connection, and I leave feeling a little lighter.
Mm.
So thank you so much, Spoon 1945. We appreciate it.
God, that makes my day.
I know it's a good.
Well, brother, I love you. Thanks for jumping in before you jump off at the deep end into whatever secret ritual you're getting up to.
Thank you. I love you too, brother, and love you all who's listening. Thanks for being
How
here.
good it can get, how much love you can let into your life, into your heart, before your mind decides it's too much. It's up to you to choose. It's up to you to choose.